And President Donald Trump is now trying to nullify former President Joe Biden's pardons, claiming that the pardons were signed with an auto pen and that he actually didn't know what he signed.
To follow up on the Biden auto pen, are those executive orders, those pardons from the former president now null and void?
Well, I think so. It's not my decision. That'll be up to a court. But I would say that they're null and void because I'm sure Biden didn't have any idea that it was taking place. And somebody was using an auto pen to sign off and to give pardons to, as an example, just one example, but the J6 Unselect Committee. They gave pardons with an auto pen. I don't think Biden knew anything about it. And what they did is they deleted and destroyed all of the information that took them over a year to get. And the reason they did that is because the information was very incriminating about them. Like Nancy Pelosi, it was determined conclusively that she knew about 10,000 soldiers and turned it down. And if we used 500 soldiers, you would have had no problem, let alone 10,000. The young lady that said that I grabbed these powerful young Secret Service agents by the neck, okay? You know that was a big hoax, it was a lie. And she admitted it, and they deleted everything. So, you know, what they did is criminal. I think we're about to land, everybody.
Yesterday, Donald Trump's press secretary addressed the looming question about whether or not Mr. Trump can undo Mr. Biden's pardons.
Have attorneys here at the White House told President Trump that he has the legal authority to undo a pardon simply because it was signed by auto pen, as he said?
The president was begging the question that I think a lot of journalists in this room should be asking about whether or not the former president of the United States, who I think we can all finally agree was cognitively impaired. I know it took people some time to finally admit that, but we all know that to be true, as evidenced by his disastrous debate performance against President Trump during the campaign. I digress on that. But the president was raising the point that did the president even know about these pardons? Was his legal signature used without his consent or knowledge? And that's not just the president or me raising those questions, Caitlin. According to the New York Post, there are Biden officials from the previous White House who raised those questions and wondered if the president was even consulted about his legally binding signature being signed onto documents. And so I think it's a question that everybody in this room should be looking into.
We're now going to bring in Andrew Donaldson from OrdinaryTimes.com for more on the accusations. Andrew, thanks for joining us today.
Always happy to be with you, Theresa.
Now, I want to start with what you make of the claim that Biden wasn't aware of what he was actually signing. Is there any legitimacy behind this?
Well, there's two tracks to it. There's the perception issue and the legal issue. The perception issue is really easy. The people that just saw the debate, the clear cognitive decline of Joe Biden, who has been in the public eye for years and years and years, so it was very apparent to folks that he was not himself towards the end of his term, and the disastrous debate performance. So it opens it up to this, like, well, how much in charge was he? What is the staff doing? Legally, though, that doesn't really matter that much, and people might get shocked by that, but we have about 110 years of litigating the verdict ruling, which controls how we do pardons. The presidential pardon is one of the most absolute things in American law. So as long as he wanted it, issued it, there's been quite a bit of litigation that the actual manner, whether he signed it, delegated it to a subordinate, whatever, auto pen in this particular case, those pardons are legally valid, and it's almost impossible to try to invalidate them. But again, this is Trump making a perception problem that also leads into a lot of the other things he wants to talk about.
And what precedent would this set if Trump can undo Biden's pardons? And do you think that there would be any legal action taken against people like Anthony Fauci, who Trump clearly has some problems with?
Well, that's the perception that he wants to build here, because it wouldn't just be Anthony Fauci or the January 6th committee that he has pointed out. Then you could go after some of the legislation that he signed and all that. That's why that's probably not going to go that far. But if you broke that precedent, yes, and that's what he wants to do. He wants to put in disparagement everything they did. However, remember this too. President Trump also uses an auto pen, although he hasn't used it for a pardon or for major legislation. He loves those signing ceremonies, but he is a lame duck president in his last thing, and he is somebody who has been under constant investigation pretty much ever since he got into the political scene. So I think there's going to be a self-limiting thing here too, where would he really want to attack the pardon power all that much? Because he's probably going to want to put out quite a bit of pardons on his own here in the next 3 years when he goes to leave office himself.
And who else would be targeted by Trump if the pardons are in fact void?
Well, see, this is the thing. The whole theory of Donald Trump's second presidency, a lot of it has been, I'm going to get back all the people who have punished me, whether that was false electors, whether that was the election being rigged, whether that was the January 6th committee. That list is long, and you've seen him already go after political enemies, both legally and just by the pressure of the bully pulpit of being able to talk about it. So that list is really long. And again, to loop back to why this is important, while those pardons are pretty much a universal power under American law, all anybody with a pardon's really got to do if they actually got hauled into court is to present the pardon to the court, and the court would dismiss the case. That's how it normally works. But this is another judicial fight he's probably picking to have. Look, he's already defying courts on things like immigration issues. He would probably like the circus and the distraction of these people that he considers enemies having the inconvenience of having to go through this process, even if it's not totally legal and it would get thrown out in court. He'd probably like that challenge, and it would play into some of his political rhetoric that he likes to use.
And can you help us understand why someone would accept a pardon while also claiming that they've done nothing wrong?
Yeah, so the verdict decision in 1915, when they actually did the original one, there was some language in there that lended people to think that you would have to accept blame to get it. And another part of that big legal argument was America's Fifth Amendment protection that you can't self-incriminate. And part of that court case was that if you get a pardon, you can no longer invoke your Fifth Amendment privilege to not incriminate. So that's where some of that comes. Since then, in recent years, they have litigated that further in the appeals court, and the appeals court has come out and said, no, that is not an admission of guilt, because pardons are used for multiple things besides just criminal pardons, also civil things. We've seen them for legal actions. We've seen every administration of the last few years issue them. And now Biden has kind of opened the door on what we are referring to as preemptive pardons and putting that out. Now, that's novel. That hasn't really been tried in the courts yet, but those are some of the examples of what we're dealing with here. But the case law is really strong that these pardons are pretty much irrevocable. But once you get to preemptive pardons, it's probably something that the appeals court and maybe even the Supreme Court is going to end up taking a look at and making a ruling on.
And how does the legal question here end up getting resolved? What happens next?
Well, there's not much of a legal question here. This is novel theory that's being pushed by the Trump administration. So, yeah, they're going to probably try to get it in court, maybe fast track it to the Supreme Court, get some kind of a ruling on it. On paper, there is no legal argument for any of this. It's pretty cut and dry. However, in the current environment we're in, they're going to push this novel theory. They want to push the boundaries of land. And again, this is an administration that likes to defy court orders because it plays into their ethos of we're fighting the system, we're fighting the deep state. These judges are stopping us from doing things. So they probably want to fight, even if they know they're probably going to lose it. It would play into their hands. But again, keep in the back of your mind, that rhetoric might change at the end of this Trump term because he's going to want to issue a bunch of pardons for his own folks and supporters and things like that. So just kind of bookmark this one. This rhetoric may change quite a bit down the road a bit when it refers to the Trump administration itself.
Now, you did mention that it's no secret that when Biden was leaving office, he was a bit shaky and he wasn't as sharp as he was when he started. But where is Trump's claim coming from? Is there any proof right now that Biden didn't sign any of these pardons?
Well, he did use an auto pen. We do know that. The president, and again, this has been litigated pretty well through the court system, the president can dictate what he wants done and then the manner it gets done. Legally, the president still ordered it. So whether a subordinate did it, an auto pen did it. Now, using an auto pen for really important stuff like legislation or a pardon, that's where Trump's trying to draw a distinction as opposed to just signing, ceremonial paperwork, things like this. If the president had to sign everything a president has to sign, that would all they would ever get done. So there has to be a medium there. So he's using that as a wedge issue rhetorically to say, hey, we don't know what he did or did not sign. That goes into what the Biden administration, frankly, set themselves up for by protecting President Biden's declining condition into these accusations. And now you got a political hot mess that they're trying to make into a legal thing that doesn't have a lot of legal standing, but the perception of it makes it sound a lot better than what it would actually hold up in court.
Andrew, thank you so much for the time today.
Anytime, Theresa. Thank you.